From Beasts Within and Without by Tesares Eliades, Professor of Xenotaxonomy, Cooperative University of the Central Spine. Large-scale psychoenergetic creatures are amongst the most difficult things in the galaxy to study. They are elusive and reclusive, powerful, ephemeral, dangerous, and, more often than not, hostile. Only a very few species regularly interact with galactic society, and they are possibly even cagier than their more isolated kin. It is relevant to this discussion that I am by birth an Aileros. The reader is likely aware that my people venerate a species of beings known as the McCoy. Not much is known about them, because outside of Aileroi society, they are almost never encountered, and within Aileroi society, they are sacrosanct. However, I assure you that the McCoy are quite real, though I very much hesitate to call them gods. Like other creatures of their template, the McCoy exert a sort of psionic gravity. Their mere presence alters the psychological landscape around them. Also, like other creatures of their template, they use this condition to keep themselves safe and obscure. Commonly, these creatures will hide within physical forms that are not their own, and leverage those forms to exert their prodigious will. The relationship the McCoy have formed with my people is unique, but the way they use it is typical. They hide, they skulk, they plot, and when they come into contact with other species, they wreak complete and absolute havoc. It perhaps goes without saying that my attempts to classify and describe them have made me something of an apostate. Welcome to The Chimera, a role-playing adventure podcast. Our current campaign setting is the starfaring superhero universe of the Old Bones, which runs on Onyx Path's Story Path system. If you're listening to this on or around the day it comes out, you may still have a day or two to back their Trinity Continuum Kickstarter, which is going to contain the whole rule set and a lot more. We've already been picking through the advanced material and thinking about how we're going to remap certain things onto the updated systems, and I think it's going to be real cool. To actually get down to things, I am Vin LeBate, and I'm playing Sidra, a living financial instrument. And joining me this week are...
I'm Braden Lamb. I'm playing Dang, an energy-eating space rhino bodyguard.
I'm Kacey Smith, playing Molly Harrow, a human technophile and gadgeteer, and the captain of the ship Chimera.
I'm Kelly Weissman Aspruth Jackson. I portray Theron Melanthios, a 7-foot-tall heretical catman.
I am Jeffrey Bard, and I play Releth, a galactic lawyer from the wrong side of the Akashic Bleed, and pilot of a mech that goes by the name of Moonin.
And, of course, our GM, Josh Hall-Bachner. Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, so when last we left our Intrepid band, we were flying down to the surface of Malus 5.
Malus 5 was the asteroid or the actual planet?
That's the planet, and
okay.
It is the asteroid. So, I think basically, as you approach closer, the surface is fairly homogeneous from the air. As previously described, you mostly have like a thick coating, like sheet of ice covering everything as far as you can see. There is a certain amount of geographical variation in terms of height, and there's a variety of places where what basically seem sort of like hills or mountains or whatever rise up out from the surface, but even those are generally coated almost entirely with ice. In places, the covering surface is kind of broken up, and it lets you basically see that this is all frozen over and basically a massive body of water underneath. And in places where it's broken, there's kind of, flowing of sort of ice rivers, areas where basically this super cold water is streaming fast enough that it's not able to freeze. But you can still see like the edges of that area kind of shifting and changing as water splashing up on it literally freezes in the air. So it's cold. That's basically the takeaway here. Came in with a pre-mapped area for investigation that he had basically pulled together with the help of the other members of the stewards. And so, absent any other plan, you'll basically be heading into land at the designated spot. There's nothing obvious from where you are that really super distinguishes that, except for that it's in an area kind of nestled near the base of a relatively large one of these icy mountains.
Wait a second, what's nestled?
Just the designated area. That's
okay.
It's like literally like, he's got a coordinate map. At least from the air, it's not really that obvious that there's that much difference in terms of any of these different areas. And just this is the particular spot that he designated.
I wonder if we can get like a little heat scan of the planet to see if maybe the ship's sensors can pick up anything that other people have been unable to, such as megafauna.
What have we established about the scanning capabilities of the Chimera at this point?
Very little.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Molly, you wanna give me any kind of an idea of what you would do with this in this circumstance then?
So like when we want to scan for something, like how that goes?
Yeah, just kind of give me a pitch for what you think Molly would do faced with this question.
Okay. So probably she'd use the lion, because the lion's pretty versatile in that you can really sort of call up any sort of means of controlling the ship that you want, excepting like the weapons system, because the snake doesn't play really very well with others. So I guess she'd basically pull up a console that would let her access things like different types of scans, which the buttons themselves, she doesn't always know if they will work until she hits them. And then something happens, either pretty much like what she expected would happen, or completely different from what she expected would happen, or not at all, depending on if she's actually accessing something that the Chimera is capable of doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you had a couple of the buttons or whatever here. There's probably some kind of soft, subtle humming that's not really necessarily obvious what it means, and it probably shifts a little in tone and tenor as you press on the controls. As you're kind of approaching at a certain point, anybody who's watching from the outside would actually see some of the energetic areas actually start to kind of ripple and shift a little bit. Not really changing shape exactly so much as just like kind of brightness and density in something that kind of mirrors the way that the effect that you'd get if you dropped a puddle into a still lake or something. And this happening on several different sides of the ship in some of the energy stripe areas. And for those of you in the ship, you can sort of see a bit of this in terms of like the actual reflection of these lights on the icy surface that you're flying over. So once that's kind of happening, one of the nearby displays is going to start basically cataloging some of the local things. Air temperature, atmospheric composition, wind speed, thickness of the ice, mapping out the area in kind of a three-dimensional, I don't remember what that word is, but the thing that you do when you take a map that includes heights.
Topography?
Yes, topological map of the area. The kind of initial version of that is pretty low detail, just kind of filling in the actual, height. But as you kind of continue to descend, it starts to kind of map out some areas of significance. Some places where the ice is thin. One spot slightly around the corner of the mountain that you're landing on, where part of the ice is actually broken open, and there's flow into one of these kind of icy rivers that I mentioned, and it also is able to report that there do seem to be some sources of extraneous heat underneath. So it definitely seems like something exists somewhere in the waters underneath here, although nothing's kind of immediately obvious surface level. It's basically just able to pick up the kind of small variance enough to tell that there's like something that if it was much closer or there was much less water in between, it would be able to register from a temperature standpoint.
Can it pinpoint the areas that it's registering these sort of anomalous disturbances?
You'd probably need to kind of fly around in a circle a little bit and try to triangulate it.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay. Yeah, you can kind of do this. Kenix is kind of watching you work on this. He doesn't really have much to add yet, but he's very interested in all of the stuff that's going on here and kind of watching very closely as you actually interact with the Chimera. And after a little bit, it's able to kind of pull together a little bit of this information. And so there's basically kind of a couple things. You get the sense that there's something inside this mountainous area, probably well underneath like the level that you're at, but something that kind of corresponds to the spot where the ice is stabbed up well from within the surface. And then also you're able to kind of establish a few areas where there are larger things underneath the water. They do seem to be moving. The size that you get is a little bit uncertain, but you're probably talking something at least 100, no more than like 300 feet in length, and a little bit less in width, and probably...
How long is the Chimera?
400 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
There does seem to be some movement associated with that. In just kind of the area that you're able to survey here nearby, you can probably sense that at least like 3 of these things are somewhere within the kind of scannable area, but nothing is really like kind of immediately below where you are. You know, these are all things you can kind of pick up as being in the broader region.
Do you know, Theron, were your visions specifically about these like creatures beneath the deep, or were they sort of these creatures used as like this is the place you want to go where these things happen to be, or is it unclear?
Do I have any impression about that, Josh?
Okay, so here's where I have a kind of a question. Mm-hmm. How to what degree, I guess, do you think that Theron tries to like interrogate and kind of like to what degree would you think that he kind of communicates back or tries to like converse about these things versus kind of trying to go off of what's presented to him?
I think that Theron has a relationship that is relatively unquestioning towards Emporos, but that is not the result of blind faith. That's the result of trying to question in the past and being unsuccessful.
Okay.
Right. So he has attempted to have a more conversational relationship with Emporos.
And
Emporos is not communicating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. So, in your previous experience with this, there were kind of these 2 kind of specific visions. The kind of overwhelming sense that you get from this is that the biggest kind of intent behind this was to bring you to this location. But definitely that at very least, it seems like Emporos wanted you to be aware that these things were here. You know, like if the concern was kind of, you know, the idea that like, oh, this is just a dead, barren planet. Like it wanted to be very clear that like if anybody's, you know, advancing that theory, it clearly is incorrect.
Okay, so I'm not certain of how critical the creatures are, but I'm certainly meant to know that they are here.
Okay. Well, then I think for the time being, let's land where Kenix wants to go, and if you feel like there's something more pressing that we should do, we can go and do that.
Very good, Captain.
He kind of rubs his hands together a little bit. So one of the pieces of kind of equipment that was kind of brought in along, you know, with all the other materials when you guys prepared to come down was some semi-portable, like environmental assistant devices in various sizes. For this, you're basically looking at kind of like rather bulky wrist guards that maintain a small kind of habitable temperature field around the body. So I think three of you might need something like that. So just be aware that's kind of the best option there. And then you've had access to kind of breathing technology before. There's nothing hostile in the atmosphere here, but it is a little bit different from like Earth-like, certainly. Mm. So Koenig's gets his on and just kind of snaps these on. They kind of click onto his arms, and little orange glowing lights kind of turn on them, and kind of the air around him kind of like glows and sparkles gently in kind of an orangish reddish way, like very faintly, but enough to kind of tell that something is on. Mm-hmm. He pulls one up and is like, "Oh, these are nice."
Yeah, Molly will get her some of those for sure.
Once everybody's ready, he's not really going to waste any time. He'll pretty eagerly wait to head out as soon as you guys open up the doors. And once you do, Koenig's is basically going to be kind of carrying two reasonably bulky kind of equipment cases, kind of like just imagine any of the times that we got asked to carry ponderous boxes of film lights around in college, and that's basically kind of what you're looking at.
So many times.
And like all of those times, he's got several additional cases that he's certainly requesting others to carry if they can. Now, he's got the two most important ones that he's just kind of running down on and not waiting to see if anybody's waiting, is following up on that.
Yeah, R'lyeh and Moonin both carry their fair share, which is mostly Moonin. So.
Yeah. Once he gets down, he's going to kind of pop one of these open at a spot that's kind of right, maybe just a few feet from where the flat ice kind of transitions into a slope and starts heading up in the mountain area, and basically open it up. There's kind of a few cylindrical devices, different kinds of weird machines with no obvious kind of usage, and then kind of a tripod type setup that they can be attached to. So he starts just kind of setting some stuff up and kind of pushing buttons and poking away at it. He seems like he might be doing this for a little while.
All right, well, once the moving is done, Theron will just survey the landscape, right? Just sort of look around, just kind of, keying in his senses, see if there's anything.
Yep. So there's kind of, once you actually look at this from the ground level, there's some kind of subtleties that kind of escape the view, the like kind of view up in the ship actually trying to come down. The actual ice itself is pretty smooth, but it does kind of have like sort of a powdering of snow or broken ice crystals on it that does seem to shift in thickness and stuff. And there's at least some places where it kind of looks like something has moved through it. Maybe it doesn't really resemble anything you'd call like an animal trail or something, but at least seems like there's evidence that something moves around on here. Taking a 360 view around, you can kind of get a sense of weather patterns, like where you are. It's windy, but otherwise clear. You can see that there are clearly kind of like, like actual clouds, storms in other areas, places where there's probably basically something like equivalent to a snowstorm or like maybe more so like a snow tornado, something kind of in that lines.
Snow-nado.
Would that be a bomb cyclone?
Tornado snow.
Yeah, in the sense that like you're looking at smaller but still relatively powerful like wind currents that are in large part kind of like picking up stuff that's available and kind of filling out with it rather than necessarily just like clouds that are actively precipitating. You can also kind of see again, off maybe 30 degrees around the nearby mountain from where you are, you can kind of spot one of these icy rivers. It's kind of the most obvious kind of notable geographic feature, again, besides the mountain itself that's kind of in the nearby area. And Theron can hear well enough to, hear that it's the water's actually flowing at a reasonably fast pace and kind of hear some of the pieces of ice and everything kind of clinking together. And you can also smell that, like, with the water kind of exposed there, that like there's something to it. You're not 100% certain what, just again, just kind of like smelling water that's like, like a quarter mile away or something, but it's enough to tell that like it isn't just like what you'd expect from just kind of clear 100% fresh water on an uninhabited planet. It smells notable in some way. It's clearly like emanating from like where the water is moving. You don't see anything obvious with like the ice.
So the water is distinctive, but there's no particular cue as to why. It's just, that's not regular water. Okay.
Bang will tromp over and say, anything interesting?
The water under the ice is surprising.
I think Sidra's probably come over with Dang. So what you're looking for is A, an icy waterfall, and B, some kind of sea whale.
Those are
sea whale. Oh, like as opposed to your usual space whale, right?
Yeah. Like that, but in the water.
Okay, I follow now.
That is what my vision showed me, yes.
And your visions come from the McCoy that lives in you.
Yes.
How certain are you that it knows what it's doing?
It takes a while to answer. He opens his mouth a few times. He sort of gestures like, well, there's this and then there's that. Eventually, he puts his hands down and stops gesturing. He closes his mouth. He refocuses on Sidra to answer a question directly, and then opens his mouth again and says, fairly certain.
Okay. Follow up. How do you... So Emporos probably intends to survive this experience and thus carry on with you.
While Sidra is talking here, you suddenly hear an incredibly loud drilling sound. And you can see that several of the devices that Calyx has set up are actually like basically taking like core samples out of the ice. And it's loud.
Yes, Emporos is very concerned with surviving and remaining free.
Right, and she's just sort of shouting over both the drilling and the wind. I'm just wondering if it cares if the rest of us die on this miserable frozen shithole.
Is that the first time I've heard Sidra swear?
No, she swears at the end of the first episode.
Oh, okay.
Editor's note.
That's probably a good moment then for Theron to realize that Emporos is probably trying to get his attention again at the moment.
Theron's ears perk up.
I'm trying to think of how to what to say here exactly, but basically, you're drawing attention.
Is it clear? Is there any more implication than those words?
Like the implication would be that like you collectively are not as in that you're doing a thing that's conspicuous, but that as in the thing that you're doing that is conspicuous is in fact getting the attention of something or someone.
I believe there may be something watching us now.
Is that bad then?
That would depend on how you feel about being watched.
I feel like there are some other factors that might factor in.
I know that most of the time when I am watching something, it is either because I find it entertaining or because I am going to eat it.
Yes, those would be the factors.
Is there a way that we could not be standing on top of the ice right now?
Not really. Unless you want to like get back in the ship and hover. Certainly there's nowhere within any obvious visible range that does not include any ice.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be some place. If something is watching us, right? It's got to be watching us from somewhere. I try to find that place.
By doing what?
I don't know, looking around, being perceptive. I would say, I don't know, checking my. What is perception? Checking my cunning and enigmas.
Or analysis?
Analysis is probably better.
This might be
Give me a
analysis
roll.
town.
Yeah, my cunning plus analysis. Oh god. I get 4 plus. No, 4. 4.
Okay. Most obvious thing, like you kind of surveil the area. None of the weather patterns really seem like they'd be conducive to this kind of thing. A lot of what you can see is a pretty wide, pretty broad area, pretty far distance to the horizon. Not a lot of cover. You're basically any type of vantage point that anyone's going to be able to see you through is going to be in one way or another through ice. So basically, you're looking at options that are either from above via like some spot within this kind of mountainous area, or from below.
Well, I'm not really good at seeing through ice, but I'll bet whatever lives here does. I start hovering a little bit. I mean, are we in danger, or is it just watching us? Is it like the hairs are really like, sticking up, or just a little bit down?
So I will note that Theron has some ability to anticipate immediate danger.
Yep, no. There's no immediate danger yet. This is more of an early warning than that.
I don't believe that we are under any immediate threat, but we ought to be on our guard.
It's about this moment that one of the devices that has drilled into the ice begins flashing a very bright set of differently colored lights downwards into the hole in the ice that was recently made. And you can see some of these basically lighting up the water in a fairly wide radius around where you are underneath through the ice and producing kind of a strange light show effect.
Oh, boy. I have a bad feeling all of a sudden.
And he's just kind of sitting there, kind of like very focused on what he's doing, kind of tweaking little knobs on the devices, and occasionally kind of scribbling in a little notepad. Not really paying attention to the conversation that you guys are having at all.
So Molly walks over to Kanix, and she's sort of keeping an eye on the ice and those flashes to see if any, shapes or shadows start to appear within them. And she says, "Hey, Kanix, so the thing you're doing right now, what's it for?"
Just initial, biogeologic survey, getting some core samples, doing some spectromatic analysis, all the usual stuff. Nothing wild.
Mm-hmm.
Tweaks something and the light gets about twice as bright.
Oh, okay. I'm just getting a feeling something around here may not appreciate it.
Let me ask you a question. How expensive is that equipment?
Oh, I didn't pay for it. You'd have to ask the stewards.
I tell everyone exactly how expensive the equipment is.
It's extremely expensive.
Hey, Theron, what does the water smell like now?
Any change in the scent of the water?
No.
It still smells off, but the same as before.
Any chance we get the ship to hover above the ice for a quick getaway?
Yeah, you can certainly have it hover there.
Dang would really like that.
I'm sorry.
Dang is not much of a swimmer.
What did this fellow employ us to do for him? Are we supposed to bodyguard him? What are we doing for him?
Really, you're mostly
we're just
transport.
Yeah.
Oh, we're just
I think
moving him here.
We've moved on to the voluntary portion of this endeavor.
Well, I mean, I assume we're supposed to get him back too, so it's kind of
Right.
like,
So we are the taxi waiting,
okay. Our meter is running.
pretty much.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So it's just this dread tension that we all feel that something terrible is going to happen soon. That we don't know what to do about.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I mean, when that happens, Raleth generally eats. So he's munching probably like space chips right now in Moonin.
Where did these come from?
He's got like different stashes inside Moonin, for just such an occasion. They kind of come from somewhere. I don't even know where Moonin gets them. He doesn't take them from the ship. They're like the emergency supplies.
So I guess Molly's going to send her hand down through one of the holes just to sort of like swim through the water and see what it can see.
Through which holes? The ones
One of the holes that Kennex made.
Okay. Okay. So your metal hand, I assume.
Yeah. The other hand wouldn't be very helpful.
Not the fleshy hand.
Yeah. So you touch it. It's obviously incredibly cold. That it notices right away.
Yeah.
The biggest things that are most obvious right away. So one, all of the water here has kind of a latent electrical charge that's greater than what you'd expect in a normal circumstance. Like there's certain amount of charge there, just kind of in a background sense. And you can also tell that basically just kind of from the way that it's moving, it's clearly there's a fairly large amount of motion underneath, not just in places where there's actually like the ice is broken, but like even like right here, right underneath, it's moving pretty quickly. And it seems obvious that the water is pretty fluid in that sense, and that things are kind of moving around underneath as well.
Sidra mentally updates her list of inadvisable things that Molly has put her hand into.
Number 43, possibly living planet. Dang says, Captain, I'm really not one to suggest splitting up the party unless it's absolutely necessary. But I think in this case, that might be our most strategic layout.
Okay. Where are you thinking you want some of us to go?
I'm going to make a roll on that, or I would just say, how many of us are there? There's
5 and a +1.
5. Yeah. I'd recommend a quincunx, which is an arrangement of 5 things in a square of 4 with 1 in the middle.
The way that they're arranged on a 6-sided die. The point.
Yes.
The pips are arranged to the 5 number on a 6-sided die.
Quincunx, everyone.
Have we
What's
done
that?
this before? Is this something we've done?
I think he'd like to think that it's something.
Yeah.
If we all came to like strategy rehearsal, probably.
I'm trying to think if Raleth would have gone to strategy rehearsal. I don't think he would have.
Almost definitely not.
So he goes to where he thinks he's like, he keeps going. Like, he takes a vector and he goes and he kind of looks at the group and kind of sees like, is this good or not? And if it's not, then he keeps going. And he looks back. He's like, yeah, no. Then he moves like to the side and to the left, and he kind of keeps trying to, but then he doesn't see anybody moving, so he stops. Wait, are you guys joking?
Theron gets in position immediately, but also once in position, he's just focused on trying to sniff and stare and otherwise examine the surroundings. So he's not very helpful in terms of helping other people get to their positions. He just knows where he's supposed to be.
Wait, so
I think
that requires...
Dang will probably form the center of arrangement.
So if that requires 5 of us, are you just suggesting that we leave Canix behind? Because we can do that.
I think it's position we're forming in the same area, so he's not part of it, but he'll probably be protected by it if we actually knew what we were doing and were able to do this correctly.
Hey, I know what I'm doing.
Braden, did you say that
Roll
Dang
up
would be the
this
center of the arrangement?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest.
Okay, so definitely
So I'm
Theron
protecting.
takes position around Molly.
Yeah, Molly just takes up whatever her position. She's mostly distracted by the fact that her hand is like incredibly cold and it's actually extremely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But she also wants to collect a sample of this water and kind of feels like eyes under there might be a good idea. So she's only half paying attention to kind of what's going on.
Sidra has no idea at all what her position is actually supposed to be. So she just wanders over to Canix to see what he's doing.
At this point, he's writing down in a pretty quick, rapid succession different kind of numbers and symbols and stuff that he seems to be reading off of indicators on several of the devices that he has. And these are all just going like kind of shorthand into a notebook, like a literal paper notebook with like a pencil or something.
So do you have a plan for encountering megafauna down here?
Well, I don't think any of the survey data that we saw suggested any in, any area that we would be surveying. So, no.
But did it preclude any?
I mean, we have pretty good visibility of the area here. I mean, if there was something big, we'd probably see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No plan. Got it.
So, Josh, you said that the water here is like more electrically charged than you would expect from just, like polar bonds and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a sense of there being like a pattern or a rhyme or reason to any of the way that this current is traveling, or does it seem just arbitrary?
Arbitrary is a very arbitrary standard, I guess, but
Right.
it does seem to be, if you had to guess, it is based on some form of consistent movement or shaping of something, like it's a standardized current, if that makes sense. Like it feels like something that is going in this direction. It doesn't feel like, oh, today it's doing this, and then maybe in 2 hours it's going to do something different.
Okay, so Molly's going to follow it.
Okay.
Or the hand is, anyway.
Like underneath the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How far is it going to follow it?
Couple miles.
Okay.
Unless something interesting happens sooner.
Okay. So, like, from the vantage point that the hand is at, from using visible spectrum, not much that it can really see. Like, the water gets dark very quickly, right? There isn't very much light coming in from above, and anything that you put into it just kind of dissipates before it really reveals anything. The underneath of the ice is less consistent than like what's on top. There's a lot of kind of differentiation in terms of height. It seems like it's kind of shaved or smoothed or whatever by like, probably the wind or whatever above into a relatively flat surface in most spots. But down below, it's a lot more uneven, big kind of changes in elevation and kind of hills and like icicles and kind of everything. So it's a little more, not treacherous, but just like, a little bit of a challenge to navigate and migrate through here. And you, as you kind of apply any kind of other like sensorial things, the electrical current seems to be kind of, omnipresent. The current is mostly kind of moving in one particular direction. You pretty quickly get the sense that this is kind of moving something kind of around the mountainy area in a direction kind of aligned with the icy river that you spotted from the air. In terms of anything else, probably the best option for actually kind of sensing anything here is something kind of more akin to like sonar.
Mm-hmm.
Like any kind of higher level, spectra. You're not getting anything for similar reasons to why you wouldn't with visible light. But with that, you can kind of try to get an idea of what's going on. And the thing that you can notice relatively quickly with that is that there is structure underlying this area that's represented as a mountain from the surface. Like there's something going up into it. So you can tell that like there's not open water in the area directly below it. There's some kind of surface, basically.
Okay. So she's going to sort of try to record the readings that her hand is getting to try and basically do a topographic mapping of this area and what that, like, the rest of, I guess it's not an iceberg, or whatever it is, like, whatever that is that's underneath the water.
Okay.
Kind of what it looks like.
Okay. You can start kind of trying to record that.
So at this point, she's just sort of sitting down cross-legged with her eyes closed because this is not something she does very commonly, and it's taking a lot more concentration to the point where she can't really pay attention to what's actually going on around her and do this at the same time.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So, Theron, at this point, Emporos is starting to get a little more. It kind of almost feels twitchy, I guess. Not really a very concrete additional message. Just kind of like it seems like it's in kind of a hyper-aware state to begin with, and it seems like it's kind of getting the sense that something more is happening.
All right. Theron's mood, especially in this instance, tends to follow Emporos's. So Theron is in a resting state of agitation, and he's not really capable of being twitchy because he's a little too graceful for that. But his spots are in the agitated orientation now, which means that they radiate and expand, sort of like they're fireworks going off in slow motion.
I think Dang will probably notice that and say, "Hey, Captain, might want to pull yourself together."
Molly doesn't actually respond.
Dang, am I in the right spot yet?
Almost.
I keep moving.
Well, Sidra is hanging out around Kanix. She's just going to start poking around at his equipment and seeing what kind of data she can pull off of it, including changing some of the scanning settings to look for biological traces, specifically like things that would line up with a large, like with the leavings of a large sub-ice creature.
Okay.
And then she's going to cross-patch that data over to Molly.
Okay.
Leavings like poo?
Yes, but also like anything like shed skin, like microbiomes that would form around something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that's going to be obvious almost immediately from this is that there does not seem to be any trace of, and this is going to be kind of backed up by any readings that Molly's hand can take. There does not seem to be any trace of anything that you would like peg as biological.
Interesting.
Huh. Very interesting.
I'm going to go out on a limb and attempt to recalibrate one of the instruments to look for something along the sort of psionic spectrum that a McCoy might exist on.
Okay, give me some kind of roll.
Right. I'd call that reason liberal arts. That sound right?
Liberal arts is my favorite skill, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of ours, pretty much. Except Josh.
What? Do I have anything that helps out with that? Oh, I'm an expert researcher. I've got expert researcher. Which I think allows me a second question after the results come in. But only one actual success.
Okay. And so what was, you're looking for something more along the McCoy lines here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Without a lot of actual detail associated with that, that definitely seems like plausible. Like there's definitely a heightened level of kind of energetic pattern.
Right.
And not really very directed, but
if I get another question from expert researcher, I think that would be to try and differentiate whether it's one thing or more than one thing.
More than one thing.
Mm. And I'm going to walk that information back to the group. So it looks like there might be something here or multiple somethings that are more akin to a psionic type entity like a McCoy than necessarily some sort of sea whale as we were previously looking for.
Which is similar to blood whale, right? Okay.
So on the upside, that's probably not something that would physically eat us. On the downside, I think at least some of us have souls. Probably you guys. And that might be worse.
Okay, so Theron?
Yes.
Depending on the exact definition of imminent, now there's an imminent danger.
Theron draws his sword.
Sidra just looks at him.
Something dangerous is about to happen.
Releth and Moonin are going to fly up a bit, 50 feet, 100 feet, something like that, and just try to get a good vantage point on the whole group from their 5 point on the die.
Okay. Anybody else want to take any other specific actions to kind of prepare themselves before anything else happens here?
Is there anything interesting happening, like under the ice, where Molly's taking her readings?
So you're going to notice two things. One, the total level of energetic current is going to kind of increase a little bit. Mm-hmm. So definitely something changes with the charge of the water.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after what Theron says, your sonar kind of path is going to be able to catch that something relatively large has slipped out from behind the kind of structural area from the mountain that you were spotting, and that it is moving towards you under the water at an extremely high rate of speed.
Is the hand able to is it something it can grab onto?
I mean, it's really big.
Just not stop it, just catch a ride.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So it's going to do that, and Molly's going to kind of jerk awake and get to her feet and say something's coming.
Okay, so nobody else has any other thing that they want to specifically do in just kind of positioning themselves or anything?
No, I'm satisfied with my quincunx plan here.
But we only have 3 dots.
Yeah, Sidra is of the position that there's literally nothing she can do to prepare for whatever is about to happen. So she's just gonna watch everyone else.
Okay.
Actually, I think Dang will make his way over towards Canucks and in preparation for enveloping him in a force field.
Okay. as you come over, you're there just in time to see a bunch of the readings and everything on his various machines start to basically go visibly haywire. And he kind of starts to make a little face, and he's like, what the? He looks at it. Then he, based on some information there, kind of whips his head around to one side with a sudden look of great concern, which basically lets him be looking in the right direction just in time for the next thing that happens, which is essentially the ice cracks suddenly, very loud. Cracks spread out like a long distance from the point of impact. Basically, where this actually happens, chunks of ice go flying outwards as something crashes entirely through the sheet in one powerful motion, sending big pieces of this ice sheet flying off in every direction. And what emerges out, it's something certainly in the kind of broad category of something that you would call a whale, right? It's got kind of a large, bulky, aquatic shape. It's got things that you kind of might classify as flippers. It's got probably about 12 total, you'd call them basically like tentacles or tendrils or something that come from near the front area, kind of backwards alongside near the area where some of the like 6 flippers are. The entire thing is made of black metal and what seems to be some kind of like cloudy, bluish white, you'd say like glass or something like some kind of hyper, glass-like substance. The overall shape is like sleek, but the details are all very kind of sharp and angular. Like it certainly reminds you of certain things that you've seen, like even in the Chimera, in terms of like what this mechanical, construction looks like. And then at the front, it has one big jaw with 3 rows of what you'd basically read as teeth made from this glass-like material, and then one giant orb of an eye that's basically kind of it's basically kind of like an inset into this shape with kind of an energy field that kind of makes the form of like a big yellow iris, basically. Mm-hmm. So it looks like an eye. And it kind of, as it comes out of the ice, you kind of see these 2 shutters open up to kind of like reveal that. And it basically just, it is probably 100 feet long. And it bursts through the ice like it's nothing and gets itself probably, 40 feet of clear air in the process.
I would like to apologize. That can definitely eat us. That's it this week for the Chimera. Join us back here in 2 weeks, or find us online at thechimera.space or at ChimeraPod on Facebook or Twitter. Don't forget to check out Onyx Path's Trinity Continuum Kickstarter, and also please consider stopping by Apple Podcasts and leaving us a review. I really think that's all the stuff for this week, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye! All right, so everybody stop your
Always ready.
recording.
Sounds good.
Stopped. Wait, I didn't stop.